Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. I'd like to thank the World Puja Network for allowing us this time to share with you some updates from some really exciting things that are happening with CSETI and the Disclosure Project this week. And you can find out more about what we're doing at disclosureproject.org or CSETI.org. I'm joined today by Linda Willitts, who's been working with us for many years and has been now helping organize some of these recent expeditions and training events that we're doing. So thank you, Linda, for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
So one of the things I wanted to just sort of introduce for today is a focus on some of the experiences that have happened in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I guess we can start with one of the more recent things that has happened, and that is about 2 or 3 nights ago on this past Saturday, we had a group of about 70 people that we were doing a workshop with here in the Charlottesville area, and we were out at some land out in the county in the Blue Ridge Mountains outside of Charlottesville, Virginia. And we had it was just a training exercise for people for just a one-day event. And we have, as many of you have heard, a number of things we use in the CSETI protocols. We do the meditations and remote viewing to make contact with these visitors, and then we also use electromagnetic devices to detect when there is an extraterrestrial vehicle that is in the area. Oftentimes they will be not visible to the naked eye, but will be shifted faster than the speed of light, which is the norm for them, but they will affect the electromagnetic systems that we have there, which include laser and radar-type detection devices like you would have in a car, and other electronic devices. In the past, we've also had magnetometers and things of this sort. And but what happened on this past Saturday, which was July, the 11th, I guess?
The 11th.
We were setting up. It was about 8:30, and the circle of people had been formed in this big meadow out in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and they had 3 of these electromagnetic detectors and laser detector devices that were there, and they were totally silent the whole time that they were initially setting up. I had a meditation experience just before going out where I invited these extraterrestrial visitors to come very close, and I saw a craft that would be overhead about 200 or 300 feet above and would be streaming a sort of celestial and etheric energy into the group and connecting with all the participants for the entire time that we were there. And it was not that far above, and it was a very large craft, about 200 or 300 feet in diameter, and this was a remote view in a meditation experience. So as I left dinner and went to enter the field, I parked, and as I walked into the western perimeter of this circle, as soon as I entered the perimeter of the circle, all these detectors started going off in all the different spectra, which is quite unusual because you would have laser band as well as Ka and K and X band going off simultaneously, and they were silent before I entered the circle. And actually, Linda was sitting right where those were set up when it happened, so she can tell you a little bit about kind of this, how it took place.
Yeah, I had set them all up, and it's as we were waiting for Dr. Greer to come to the circle, and I watched him approach. I saw him drive up, and they were silent the whole time. And as soon as he broke the perimeter of the circle, they all started going off. They're very tuned into him.
Well, and what was interesting is that it continued for the entire evening, and we had a number of etheric objects and a number of orbs, sort of circular objects that would blip in and out of linear space-time for a few seconds or a second or two very quickly and then vanish. But there was this sort of unusual energy that was all around the circle the whole time. And it was very similar to the Orion transmissions that happened in 07 and 08 in Joshua Tree National Park, and which has then now continued into the expedition we took to Crestone. And what's interesting about these electromagnetic devices is that we're in a very, very remote area. There's no source of microwave, and there certainly wasn't a police car anywhere nearby setting them off. And what's also interesting is that they're happening in a way that's highly interactive, meaning that when certain things are being said or shared, there will be a confirmatory note or tone that will happen as if it's in a dialogue through these electromagnetic devices. And we were all laughing about how, the tens of millions of dollars that have been spent on the CSETI project that has the massive radio telescopes searching for extraterrestrial life, and we're out there with a couple $100 worth of electromagnetic devices in a remote area with 70 people in a field, and we're having all of this exchange taking place, which we have recorded, and as well as often objects, ET craft in the sky or in the field or around us. What's fascinating also is that they seem to be very much keyed into the sort of the emotional state and coherence. Whenever I would talk about the group being in a state of what Rupert Sheldrake would call a morphogenic field coherence, there would be a very pronounced interaction and burst of electromagnetic signaling from these electronic devices, as if to emphasize the importance of that in the meditative state during contact with these interstellar civilizations. Now, we know that's true because even as far back as the 1950s, I have interviewed people in classified projects where when they were looking into this issue with all kinds of electronic equipment, that they would often find that one person, they'd have 7 people out doing some kind of reconnaissance program, and each person would be getting some kind of electromagnetic signal, and none of it made any sense until they found that all of them shared it together, and then it made a coherent picture. In this sense, they're looking for people who are on these ambassador to the universe training programs that we're doing, and that we're doing more and more of, because we feel that we're on the final countdown to really large-scale contact all over the world, that people have got to be trained to know how to interface with these advanced civilizations and what the protocols and the techniques are, which is what we're doing at CSETI.org, CSETI.org. And I think that whenever we have found that the group is in a deep meditative state and reaches a certain level of coherence, that there are sort of an exponential increase in the kind of events and contact that occurs. And when I was just even describing this to this new group of people, I mean, there were a large number, 75 or 80 people, most of whom had never been involved with any of this before, that these electromagnetic detectors would get extremely excited and would give a series of very specific sequences. And this happened more than once. And so there is content and meaning in terms of their interaction, as well as just the tones that we're hearing. Now, it was interesting because when I first arrived there, we have some electromagnetic tones that were recorded in some crop circles Colin Andrews provided to us in the 1990s, as well as some tones that we had come into our group when we were at Mount Shasta a few years ago. And those tones we play over a CD player and project over a radio transmitter out into space while we're also doing the meditation and sending laser streams of laser light up into space. And so what we found was that they're now doing almost a continuous, unbroken lock-on with these electromagnetic systems the entire time we're out. And the only time they stop is when we're doing a group meditation. And we also, during that meditation, do a prayer for the healing of the earth and for the establishment of world peace and universal peace. And when we do that, they all fall completely silent because they're joining with us and they don't want to interrupt the meditation. So it's so beautiful and it's poignant and an almost unbelievable level of coherence and interactivity with these interstellar civilizations. And while this is going on frequently, and this is what happened, I want to share this, in Crestone, Colorado last month in June, was we'd have craft that would be in the sky or objects that would be hovering at the top of the higher altitudes of these 14,000-foot peaks around us, or even orbs that would come and burst right outside the group, almost in a blinding light, which is what happened in Crestone a few weeks ago. I guess it was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago now, 4 weeks ago. Or less than that, actually. It was the third week of June.
It was the 22nd.
So I think that what we're seeing is an exponential increase in the constant level of contact that's now become unbroken every time we gather to do this, which I have to say in the 19 years that I have been doing this, this is a true exponential quantum leap forward in contact, and this is why we're convinced that we're in a ascendancy of contact and that we're in the final countdown to a massive transformation on this planet that will affect not only the technologies we use, but the realization that we're not alone in the universe, and a completely new structured civilization that is going to be based on universal peace and the elimination of the kinds of obscene corruption that there exists on the planet today, which has caused the world to be deprived of the knowledge of this, but also deprived of the sciences and technologies related to this whole area of study that would give us free energy and abundant energy. So what we're seeing is that this is increasing, and we're getting the same reports out of England. One of my close friends is the world-renowned crop circle researcher Colin Andrews, who actually will be joining with me and Dr. Ted Loder and Dr. Lynn Katai of the Phoenix Lights at our conference. We're going to have a big mass contact gathering in Arizona, outside of Tucson, Arizona, in October from the 24th through the 26th of this year. And you are all invited to come to that. We're going to do an experiment where we're going to be out every night with a couple of hundred people out under the stars on this rooftop terrace of this beautiful resort that we're going to be using. And we're going to be using these protocols for a mass contact event to see what transpires out under the stars, and also to train everyone in this whole contact process that CSETI has developed over the last 19 years. So those of you who want to find out about that, you can go to CSETI.org/contact, CONTACT. What's interesting, too, and I think this is something that Colin Andrews, is that they have a sort of a scale where they measure the level of contact going on over in the crop circles associated with materialized UFOs, military reconnaissance, people seeing actual manifest beings that are in the field, that are seen by people, and they have never been on as high alert as they are this summer, that they have seen an exponential increase in the level of these things happening in England at the same time that the CSETI group has been having this happen in our expeditions in the Colorado Rockies, and now, of course, here in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. So, Linda, you may want to share some of the details. You reviewed those reports recently.
Yes, the most recent report, an incident happened on the 7th of July just this past week, where a police sergeant in England was driving past Silbury Hill at 5 o'clock in the morning, and he noticed 3 exceptionally tall people, what looked like people, inspecting a new crop circle in one of the fields. So he stopped and watched for several minutes, and he said they were just extremely strange to him because they were way over 6 feet tall. Each had blonde hair, and they were wearing one-piece white suits with hoods that had been kind of dropped to the back of their heads. And so he watched them for several minutes, and they appeared to be examining the crop circle. And so then he shouted at them, and they started running. And he said they ran at like superhuman speed. And he was very also aware of like a static crackling sound in the field. The plants moved around as though, static electricity was affecting the plants. And he also suddenly got a headache, which became worse as the day went on. But he was very, very, kind of weirded out by these beings because they were just so strange, and he was quite sure that they were not human beings. And so this is being investigated. The police officer has been interviewed by UFO and crop circle researchers. And Colin Andrews is actually, I guess he already had a trip scheduled to England next week, so he's going to be looking into it even further and interviewing more people who've had similar experiences over the years with 7, 8, and 9 foot tall beings that they've seen fully materialized form. They look like humans, but they're just exceptionally tall.
Right. And, of course, we have had similar when we were in Colorado last month. From around, I guess it was the 21st to the 27th, we were of June. So very recently, we had beings that walked right through and around our circle that were seen by a number of people that did the same sort of thing where they would appear and then vanish. And we had 4, I believe it was, fully materialized ET beings at Joshua Tree National Park a couple of years ago, where they were standing just outside the circle where we do our contact work out in the center of the national park, and they were completely materialized just by some Joshua trees outside the circle within 5 feet or so of our circle, and then also just vanished into thin air, even though they were quite visible and what have. And this is exactly what you would expect when you're dealing with interstellar civilizations that have spacecraft that we've had fly over us. For example, in Joshua Tree, we had one that appeared just outside of where our circle is, where we have a landing site, and where we had seen, Linda was with us on this, her first trip back in '96. We had a 200 or 300 foot diameter craft, looked like a Hershey's Kiss actually, that was kind of teal blue green, and it came straight down out of the zenith, out of the sky, and very rapidly went to the earth and looked like it was going to explode, but instead it just lit up the desert floor and merged straight into the desert, and that's where they were showing us their underground facility that's up in the high desert, up in the Joshua Tree National Park, and it's a very specific high plane that we go to. And this craft that then, just very recently when we were out there in the last couple of years, it materialized right to the east of our circle, which is in the direction of this landing site where we saw this big craft that lit up the whole desert go in '96. This craft appeared there, and as it did so, it made the strangest sound, sort of a just like that. And it came from the east going to the west, right over the circle, a little bit on the south side of the circle, but maybe only 15 to 20 feet, 10 to 20 feet above us, so low that if I had stood on a chair and jumped up, I really feel like I could have touched the underside of it. And it was completely materialized, and not an enormous craft. I would have guessed this one to be maybe 20 or 30 feet across. And then as it got to the other side of our circle, it floated over relatively slowly, and as it got to the other side of our circle, it just vanished into thin air. Now, a lot of people say, well, how is that happening? And I explained that anything that's interstellar, as opposed to a classified anti-gravity ship that's made at Lockheed Martin or Northrop, if it's interstellar, it has the ability to materialize and then dematerialize as easily as we would turn on a light switch. Because if you're going through interstellar space at multiples of the speed of light, you're not actually accelerating to the speed of light and then going through a light barrier. You're actually having a set of electronics that allow all the matter, and including the people on board one of these spacecraft, to shift resonance frequency in such a way that they go beyond the frequency of light and matter, electrons and what have you, into what some people would call another dimension or a trans-dimensional state, which the mystics used to call the etheric or astral field, and it's very related to that. And therefore, they can travel across vast linear distances of the universe in a non-linear way. And we have found that this is precisely what we're seeing with these beings appearing and these spacecraft appearing, as well as what's going on with these electromagnetic detectors that are signaling to us. Because if it was just being sent into the group from space linearly to where we're sitting, it would not be able to, when you have these detectors that are very close to each other, it wouldn't make one go off on the laser spectrum, another one go off on a K-band, another one go off on an X-band, and what have you, at the same time. It would be one or the other, or they would all go off on multiple bands. And that's not happening. And I explain to people that the reason it's so specific and therefore is creating a dialogue through these rather inexpensive electromagnetic devices we have is that it's going from what I call infraspace. It's coming in from this non-linear, non-local field that is interfacing with the detector from within it, as it were, which, because if you understand the structure of the cosmos, you have the material cosmos, but within each material thing is sort of the subtle energy of that object that crosses over through the light barrier into the sort of the etheric and astral energy of it, and beyond that into more subtle energies, all the way to the field of pure consciousness, because every photon and atom is actually conscious and awake. And there have been very well done reproducible studies in physics showing that awareness is omnipresent, and that the Vedas, when they said all this is that, meaning all that exists in the relative cosmos is also pure consciousness, that this is really true. And so we're dealing with trans-dimensional civilizations that are interstellar, but they're interstellar not using, solid rocket boosters or hydrogen or ion pulsed engines or any of that sort of stuff. They're using very, very advanced concepts of physics that deal with these technologies that go beyond the speed of light and the speed of the frequency of matter, so that these objects and beings can appear and then vanish very, very quickly. And that's what we're having have happen. But instead of it happening a few times during the course of a week, it's now happening continuously, even at these one-day events like we just had here. We have never had anything like that happen in this area. And we have done a number of these expeditions where we have had sightings right here in the Charlottesville area, and where we have had craft or heard tones, but we have never had something like this where we've had a lock-on that's lasted for 4 hours continuously and unbroken. And in Colorado a few weeks ago, we had this happen for 6 nights in a row, 4 or 5 hours every night, without cessation, except when we would be entering a meditative state and they would become quiet to join in this meditation and prayer for contacting them and also for the healing of the earth. And we do this every night when we're out under the stars together. So I think that what's happening is that we're seeing a higher and higher level of contact with materialized craft and beings, but this is happening worldwide. And if you understand the whole concept of Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenic fields, that as more and more people are being trained to make contact and are getting readied, I think we're in a state now where we're in truly this sort of final countdown to mass contact and transformation of the planet from its current very dysfunctional geophysical and geopolitical state to one that will be highly ordered and using completely new technologies and with a new consciousness. And that's, to me, this is indicating that the time is approaching very rapidly, and that's why we're having this gathering. We have never done this, by the way, in 19 years. We're having this gathering here outside Tucson in October that you are all invited to come to. It's going to be amazing 3 nights, because during the day we're going to have presentations that I will be making and Colin Andrews will be making, and Dr. Loader and Dr. Lynn Katai, who had all the contact with the Phoenix Lights. But we're also every single night going to be going out all together to make mass contact under the stars out in the desert. It's going to be quite a historic and exciting event. But we're convinced that now's the time to be doing that, because imagine what 200 or 300 people out under the stars in meditation doing this, how it can completely transform the world situation from a very, very high level of consciousness, doing this together in coherence with these interstellar civilizations, some of whom are multiple millions of years more advanced than ours and are wanting to join us in this experience. And we're actually going to do a mass puja. We're on the World Puja Network, so why not talk about this? A mass puja and meditation out under the stars with all these people. And I think what we're going to see is that it's going to quicken, it'd be like a quickening of this whole transformative process. And so that's what we're doing this year. And thanks to Linda, we're now able to, we're doing these one-day events where we're having all these contact experiences happen. We just have done a one-day event in Denver, and then we just did this one here in the Charlottesville, Virginia area, and we'll be doing one in the Bay Area. Those of you who live in Northern California or on the West Coast, we're going to be doing that at the International Organization of Noetic Sciences, the IONS facility in Petaluma, which is, I guess, about 45 minutes north of San Francisco proper, up in Marin County, and they have a beautiful facility and a couple hundred acres, I think, of land, and we're going to be doing that in August
30th.
On the 30th of August there, and you can find out about that also at CSETI.org, where we have the training and workshops. And then in September, we're going to be doing it in the mountains of North Carolina, in Asheville, North Carolina. We're going to have a lecture on September 11th, and then we're going to do this expedition out under the stars and workshop on September 12th, and we have a place there outside of Asheville in the mountains we'll be doing this. So we're going to be doing this all over, and by doing this, we're giving people this contact training kit that includes the remote viewing training program and the meditation instruction and the CSETI contact protocols, as well as the book, my most recent book, Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge. And once the new book comes out, that's coming out, that's going to be about all our contact experiences, that we'll be sending that to people coming to these, so that when people, by the time they come, they will be fully aware of it, and then we'll be ready to make mass contact together. So that's kind of what we're doing. And what we see happening is that as we've gone from an episodic sort of level of contact over the last few years, it's now become an unbroken and highly interactive and communicative, and I think we're on this really exponential ascendancy of contact and transformation on the planet. It's really very exciting to see it happening.
One thing you pointed out also was that the ETs, communicating by sending their energy into the radar detector so that we could all hear the communication and experience it, but also that same energy was being received by the bioelectric fields of our bodies, and so it was affecting us physically, internally, as well as sound we could hear through the detectors.
Right. It's like the detectors were the outward material, electromagnetic, or technological expression of something much more profound happening, where people, I know, for example, in Colorado, there were people who were having this massive amount of energy flowing through them that was opening up various chakra centers. And one woman who was there, who was raised in a traditional Christian background, had never paid any attention to the whole ideas of chakras and areas of energy and centers of energy in the body and the astral body, said that she actually saw them lighting up. And there was an older gentleman there who was, I guess, in his 70s, who had 44 years of incapacitating back pain and problems. And after it happened, he didn't have any. It was the first time he had been pain-free And all this had happened because of this continuous flow of energy that was streaming into the group. And it's on a level of really celestial energy that is affecting the etheric and astral body, but it does affect the physical body, and people can actually feel it. It's really quite profound.
Utterly amazing and astonishing and wonderful, really.
Yeah, it is wonderful. It's you just go from astonishment, to be honest with you. And the other thing that I haven't mentioned is that about 3 weeks ago when we were in Colorado, we had on one of the evenings, I can't remember which one now because it's all such a blur. I mean, I've just been living on jets and going 24 hours a day. But we were sitting out on this sandy area there in the San Luis Valley, and near just north of the Great Sand Dunes, if you know where that is. And to our east are the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, but they're fairly close because Crestone, Colorado, is right up against the mountains. They go straight up from there. And in fact, many of the buildings in Crestone are in the foothills as you rise up. And we're sitting from where our site is, where we do our contact work, is about 8,000 feet elevation. And the mountains go up to a little over 14,000 feet. And as we were sitting there one evening, we began to notice these brilliant white, almost diamond white lights up at 12,000, 13,000 feet or more up on these impossibly sheer cliffs and high areas of the mountains. And so we began to signal to them, and they began to signal back. And at one time there were 3 or 4, and some people felt there were 5 of these craft that were up there. And they were kind of luminous plasma-like craft, and they were, to be bright enough to be seen at that altitude and that distance, they were quite substantial. And during part of this whole exercise, we're there with these objects lit up that we're signaling to. All these electronic detectors are going nuts, with energy that's flowing through them from infraspace, like I said, on different spectra, but at the same time. And then suddenly there's this brilliant burst of light, and about 5 feet outside our circle, and I guess there were about 35 people there was this soccer ball, basketball-size orb that was actually an ET spacecraft that was shifted into this orb formation that burst 5 feet outside our circle and was so bright that it was just utterly blinding. And some people saw it kind of greenish, and others saw it really as very kind of a bright, brilliant blue-white color. I was looking through some night scopes, so it was just utterly blinding. In fact, it knocked out all the light cells in this night scope for a few seconds because it was so bright. And then it became this craft that was all around us, and the temperature went up remarkably, and there were changes in the atmosphere so that afterwards we could actually hear distant streams as if they were inside some big domed space with us. That then created the sense that we were in this vehicle. Although it was translucent, you could see all this subtle energy and lights moving all around, and then there were these ET beings that moved through the group and that would blip in and blip out. So it was just this amazing, very, very close encounter and contact. But it started with these electromagnetic devices going off the instant we got on site, and then was followed by these brilliant lights up in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains that then, one of them just in an instant, I mean faster than you could blink an eye, appeared 5 feet, literally 5 feet outside the group and burst forward. So this is the sort of thing that's happening all just in the last few weeks since I've had a chance to do the World Puja Network interviews. And we're just really excited about it. It's almost at the point of overwhelming in terms of the rate of change and the kinds of beautiful things that are happening.
I'll just point out that the radar detectors, we've had those in the field with us, at least 2 of them most of the time, for years.
Oh, yeah.
And very occasionally, like sometimes they won't make a peep the whole week, and occasionally they'll go off in a small burst of sound just directly related to either a being that we can see walk right near them or or a craft that appears close by. But until the November of 2007 Orion transmissions, we had not had this constant and frenetic activity, and in that year it lasted for 23 minutes. It just blew us away. And then it didn't happen again. We had the same radar detector and more in the field for 3 more trainings after that. Didn't happen again until Joshua Tree 2008 in November. And then we had, over the course of the week, approximately 5 hours of it. And then it didn't happen again in the Outer Banks training in early 2009, but it did happen in Creston.
Well, it did happen once. Remember the gentleman where it happened for him because of the he had asked for them to do that because he had been at the 07 or 08 Joshua Tree event, and he had missed the first night at the Outer Banks in May of this year when we had this big flotilla of craft in the north and northwest that was followed by this huge ship that flew all the way across the sky that about half the group saw, but very quickly and entered the ocean. And then for over an hour, we had these 3 lit objects 90 feet from us on the beach that we filmed. We're actually showing this at these lectures and workshops because it's so astonishing. That was there communicating with us. But see, he missed that, and he had asked the ETs to do something with his, because he had bought a new detector, and he had it on the chair between his legs, and it went off just as he asked them to do so when we were in the middle of this meditation. So it is so interactive and even compassionate because he was feeling kind of bad that he had missed that major event on the first night. So, but it did happen then, but not as continuous as it subsequently did, of course, at Crestone.
That was so sweet because the ETs did that specifically for him, and we had 2 other radar detectors in the field that never made a sound.
Correct. The other 2 didn't make a peep.
So
and so, yes, I mean, and so the interactivity of this and how it's linked into thought and consciousness, and a lot of people think, well, this is impossible because it's so interactive with your thought and the coherence of the group and meditation. And I tell people, I said, yes, but you're thinking like a 21st century or 20th century human, when in reality we're dealing with interstellar civilizations that are thousands to millions of years more developed than we are. And, the big science of the next 1,000 years on Earth, as soon as we can complete getting these new energy and propulsion sciences out and safely established, will be the science of consciousness and the interface with mind and thought, even with technologies and all sorts of development of higher states of consciousness. And this is where the Vedic knowledge of the ancient Vedas and the Puja are so critical to understanding the extraterrestrial reality, because they understand this very well. They certainly work with the angelic realm, or as some would call the concourse on high, and the higher beings and the avatars. And when we have these experiences, we literally find ourselves surrounded not only with these manifestations of the extraterrestrial craft and beings, but we also can sense, and many people have experiences with angelic beings and ancestral beings that are connected to the work we're doing, because it's all part of this big cosmos. And the cosmos is not just material, but it's also conscious. And these worlds of consciousness and worlds of light are very involved with the work that we're doing, and with this process of the transformation of life on Earth. Even though we view this as only a material realm, and it is a material realm, and we have bodies and all of that, but it's also a spiritual realm, and we have our spirit bodies and consciousness. And so this is certainly the reality for these civilizations from other worlds, and they understand this very, very well, because to go faster than the speed of light at a resonant frequency beyond the speed of light and matter, you cross over in what I call the crossing point of light into these realms of the etheric and astral, and they traverse and are interfacing with that realm, which includes the realm of visualized thought and coherent thought and deep meditation, as easily as we talk on cell phones and telephones. So once you get that kind of paradigm established in your awareness and understand, the real Vedic cities, SIDDHIS, these powers that the masters in the ancient Vedic traditions could do, such as bilocation, teleportation, levitation, precognition, remote viewing, all this, then it makes complete sense that these civilizations would have this ability, and that's what we're actually using as our operating paradigm as we go out under the stars together in these gatherings, and that's why it's so exciting for people.
And you had pointed out also that this phenomenon we're experiencing with the radar detectors is proof of the consciousness technology interface that the ETs use and that you've talked about so often over the years.
Yes, I first wrote about this in 1991 in a comprehensive assessment paper that's in my first book, Extraterrestrial Contact, The Evidence and Implications, which you can get at disclosureproject.org, along with all these other meditation CDs and remote view training and CSETI protocol CDs and Hidden Truth book and what have you. But this book had in it this thing I wrote, and it actually went through the aerospace industry and the CIA and other places, and I got a phone call from a senior aerospace engineer that worked for McDonnell Douglas at the time before they had merged with Boeing. And he said, how in the world do you know this? Because he said it was the most accurate assessment he had ever read of this subject. And I said, well, I've had contact since I was 8 years old with these beings, and this is what I've learned through multiple events. And after that, I became a meditation teacher and a Sanskrit scholar and a Vedic scholar, and it all made sense that if you're dealing with interstellar civilizations, their technologies are transdimensional. If they can go from one star system or galaxy to another, they're not staying in linear space-time. They're crossing into these transdimensional realms, and their technologies, even their communication technologies, which are devices, are interfacing with coherent thought. And that's what we use. Now, that's why we call it coherent thought sequencing, is when we all go into a deep meditative state and remote view the location of these ET spacecraft, and then using very coherent thought, we show them our location, like a laser in thought, even while we're using lasers and electromagnetic tones over radio signals to come up from the same place in linear space-time. We're using all these, both consciousness technologies as well as conventional ones, and that's why we've had such a high level of success with contact. And I think that it's because we understand, and this is what we're teaching. In medicine there's a saying, see one, do one, teach one. So you see it done once. The next time you're doing it yourself, and the next time you're teaching someone else to do it. And our objective in doing this, and I know this is what Linda and I have talked about a lot since she's become working on this full-time with us, is to get as many people trained, not just intellectually, but experientially, making contact using these protocols so that they can become ambassadors from Earth to these civilizations during this time of great change and transformation, where they will really understand why these beings are here, what the future is going to look like, how to make contact, etc. And that's why we're doing, we used to only do these one-week events, maybe 4 times a year. Now we're doing those as well as these one-day training expeditions in these various cities, because we really feel it's important to get that knowledge out, but also to give people that experience, so that there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people who understand that. And that's why it's going to be such an interesting experiment for all of us. It's not just going to be a passive workshop where people sit and hear lectures like you normally have at these things, although we'll be doing that in the afternoon with Colin Andrew and Dr. Katai and myself and Dr. Loder. But in the evening, we're literally going to be out under the stars together in Arizona in October doing this mass contact event right near where many of the big Phoenix Lights sightings occurred in 1997. So we'll see what happens from that. It'll be the very first time we've done that, and we're very excited about doing this as a program for we can't hold more than 300 or 400 people, but up to that number. So it should be really exciting, and I think it will have a huge effect in world consciousness as we do it. Because one of the things we also do when we're doing these, when we're out under the stars doing this, is that we join in with these interstellar civilizations as well as the angelic realm and invite them in a prayer to heal the earth, but then we go and actually visualize the people who are in the classified projects who are keeping the secret becoming cooperative with disclosure and with bringing out the new energy technologies. We go and actually see our world leaders and see them becoming enlightened and being given a new vision of what a beautiful planet we can have here. And so we'll go to visit Obama and Sarkozy and Brown and the Kremlin and what have you. And so we do this as a group meditation without any kind of angst or political anger or anything like that. It's purely from a spiritual consciousness in meditation and prayer. And we think doing that with large numbers of people also has an enormous effect, beneficial effect in the world.
And we have seen evidence of that over the years as well. I mean, we are really making a change in the consciousness of the whole planet.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think that's why, on the spiritual reason for having had so much opening take place in the recent last couple of years with this major G7 country that wants us to embark, as the Ministry of Defense said to me, quote, a long-term journey together to make contact with these visitors, to end the secrecy and to do so in a peaceful and diplomatic way, is that we have been modeling this, but also by doing it from a deep level of consciousness, all of you who participate in that and learn how to do it, you're actually creating, as Rupert Sheldrake would talk about, this sort of morphogenic field that creates the change and creates a new reality. And that's the magic of consciousness and people doing it together in large numbers of people. It actually creates a dynamic that transforms the situation on this planet. And to be part of that is wonderful, and that's why we're trying to bring in as many people as possible right now to do that.
And the ETs have been showing us that they are extremely happy to interact with brand new people that are, rather novices to this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at what happened, at the Outer Banks in May, this is now only July. It's hard to believe that it's only been, a little over 2 or 2.5 months since that event happened. It seems like it's been 5 years. So much has occurred. But 25 of the people who were there out of the 30-some people were people who had never been on one of these expeditions. And the very first night we were out, this massive craft that was 3 inches big at arm's length. If you put your hand out and look at what in the sky, and you imagine how tiny a jetliner looks, it's like a fraction of a millimeter when a jet is in the sky, or maybe a millimeter. This is 3 inches at arm's length, lit up, and it materialized, and then would dematerialize and vanish, and then materialize and dematerialize on a trajectory from space straight into the ocean. That was seen by about half the group who was looking in that direction. It happened very quickly. But then it was followed by these objects, these lit objects that would either be in thin air, nothing there, right 90 feet from us over the sand, about 4 feet above the sand, and then they would signal light to us as we were talking. And then the craft, the actual physical enormous craft, was dematerialized all around us, and you could see this etheric energy field, but then these brilliant lights, visible to everyone there, and filmed with our camera for over an hour, more than 100 times, that these objects actually signaled to us and lit up that close, 90 feet from us. And that was with people, as Linda was saying, that 25 of the 35 were people who had never been on one of these expeditions. We're just learning about it. Same thing here in Charlottesville on Saturday night on the July 11th. And I think in Colorado we had about 25 people who had never been on one of these expeditions. And so I think in that sense it's a very life-altering experience. And what I tell people is that they're now made ambassadors to the cosmos because they understand the Rosetta Stone of contact, the Rosetta Stone of communication and translation between humanity and these visitors, and it has to do with deep understanding of consciousness, the Vedas, meditative states, consciousness, and these sciences, as well as some of these material sciences that we use, and or technological sciences. And luckily, we're able to do this with our God-given conscious mind and the fact that we're all non-locally aware beings, even when we're just thinking we're just locked in our little bodies. In reality, the nature of our conscious mind, as Erwin Schrödinger said, the total number of minds in the universe is one, and that is it's a singularity, that conscious awareness is this single, unbounded, eternal field of awareness, and that's what's really streaming through our individualities that allow us to be conscious and sentient. And that's true of these ET visitors as well. And so when you understand that very simple concept, then you begin to practice the meditation techniques that take you into that deep and unbounded state of mind. You can begin to learn how to use the sciences, what are being called the siddhis, the S-I-D-D-H-I-S is how that's spelled, in the Vedic tradition, to make contact, to communicate, to have all kinds of wondrous things happen. And that's what we teach people on these, to the extent we can in one day at these one-day workshops, but that we also on these week-long expeditions. And we're going to be going actually next month in August. I think it's the last week of August, pretty much at Mount Shasta up in California. And then in November, we're going to be at Joshua Tree at this contact site where we've had so many things happen and where the Orion transmissions first started a year and a half ago in November of 2007. And those are the last two week-long expeditions we're doing this year. But we will have these other one-day training workshops and expeditions in the Petaluma area north of San Francisco on the 30th of August, and then in Asheville, North Carolina on the 11th and 12th, and in Costa Mesa, California, Southern California, Orange County on November 13th and 14th. So I hope some of you can come to those when we're doing them so you can learn these techniques and also begin to form contact groups in your area. One of the things we're encouraging people to do is to go back to their homes and get together with 2 or 3 or 4 people. You don't need a lot of people. Less is more. You know, you don't really. It's hard to create the kind of coherence when there's a huge number of people. But I think if you have anywhere from 3 to 8 people, it's plenty, and then begin to practice these protocols. And the people who are doing that are having really quite amazing contact experiences all over the world. I mean, from South Africa to Malaysia to Japan to all over the United States and Canada and where have you. And so what we're seeing is that this is creating a global event, a global contact event, and making fertile the soil for the sprouting of open contact, disclosure, and the transformation of our society, being made ready to live with these new and advanced technologies and concepts, including the free energy and propulsion technologies, which, frankly, we should have had 100 years ago, but which have been delayed due to just blatant corruption and suppression. But this is all part and parcel of a process that has to happen. And so we're living at the time right now of one whole era in human history being closed out and another whole era opening up. And we're really at this ascendancy point of this transformation. If it's been sort of like the pre-dawn darkness for the last 100 years, now we're getting into the sun's going to rise, and it's going to be quite dramatic when this new sun rises. And so that's what's happening, and it's very, very exciting.
Another thing that I'll add right here towards the end is, remember we've talked about in the past in Crestone, Colorado last year, actually we were up on Blanca Peak, when the stars in the Big Dipper went out one by one.
Yes.
And
right.
communicated with us. And then remember this past visit to Crestone, it was after our first night of field work, and the group of us that were staying in the one house got together for a debriefing and went out then to kind of say goodnight to the ETs about 2:30 in the morning. And we were looking at the Dolphin constellation because it's beautiful. And there were about 7 of us. All of our attention was directed at the Dolphin, and you signaled to some stars that were kind of vertically near, a little to the right and up from the Dolphin, and those stars started going out, remember?
Yes, that happened this year. It was amazing because we were just thinking about what had happened the previous year when our webmaster for the OrionProject.org was thinking, gee, wouldn't it be amazing in this up at 9,000 feet where we were on Blanca Peak that night if the ETs could just signal to us by making each star in the Big Dipper just go off and on like a light switch, and they started doing it. Well, this year we were out, as Linda mentioned, doing this sort of good night and goodbye, and it was very late, 3 in the morning or something, I forget what time, and I signaled with my laser up in that area, and there were 3 vertical stars kind of near the Dolphin constellation underneath the Milky Way galaxy, and they started doing the exact same thing in crystal clear air, just signaling to us as I did so, and so it was an energy field that was doing that. So there's so many ways in which these things happen, and there's almost an infinite number of ways that these ETs manifest, and it's not just like the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Yes, we've had craft materializing it, but actually these other ways that they do it, which of course keeps them out of harm's way from the SDI Star Wars weapon systems that are targeting them, in a way is more poignant and beautiful and astonishing, because it's nuanced and it's subtle and often very, very, very highly interactive with thought and consciousness and the love and the coherence of the group. And that's when you realize you're dealing with very advanced civilizations that are with us. And, and what they're really saying is that we're never alone, and they're in constant contact at this point, unbroken contact. It's really quite astonishing.
It is. It's wonderful.
So, well, I'd like to invite people to look into this further. If you're in any of these cities where we're going to be or near there and want to come to these lectures and workshops, you can see what they are at CSETI.org. And then the conference we're doing in Arizona in October 24th, 5th, and 6th, it's going to be in this beautiful area called Rio Rico, 40 minutes outside of Tucson. That'll be in the desert at this really, really nice retreat and just a beautiful facility, a special conference under the stars, and we're going to be celebrating and making ET contact together. You can find out that's CSETI.org /contact, CONTACT, contact. And we'll be doing that, and it's going to be, I think, an amazing experience. We're in touch on almost a daily basis with Colin Andrews, who's going to be over in England with these amazing events that are happening there, and Dr. Lynn Katai, who will be joining us, who had significant personal contact with the ETs. She's also a medical doctor who's in the Phoenix area. That all started around the time of the Phoenix Lights. And then, of course, Dr. Ted Loder is going to be going through all the new energy updates and what we're finding with that, and sort of an overview for people who are interested in energy and the environment. And then I'll be doing the discussions and training about how to make contact, and then the events that will be out under the stars probably for about 4 hours every night, which is really awesome, because this particular facility that we're going to be using has a massive roof terrace where all the lights can be off, where we can have a sound system and lasers and everything else that'll hold 300 or 400 people. So it's going to be just an amazing thing to do that all together and see who comes and see what happens. So it will be quite an exciting event, I think, and rather historic, since nothing like this has really ever been done. So I hope to see some of you at these events, and I'd like to thank Linda for joining me and helping with all these special projects that she's now organizing.
Well, you're certainly welcome. It's always a pleasure.
We'll speak to you in a couple of weeks. This has been Dr. Stephen Greer with Conversations with Dr. Greer at the World Puja Network. Thank you, all of you folks at the World Puja Network, for hosting us, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.